computer. Okay, so good afternoon. We're here today for one more session of our Grandma's March event 2024. This is the fourth edition, and this year the theme of the year is it is time to revive our roots and ask ourselves, what did we do once we knew? And today we have with us a very special guest, Deborah Lavine. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing it well. Yes, okay. And I want to, before I go to you, Deborah, I want to thank you for you joining us and for being here today. I guess we met recently, and actually through the G100 mission. So we're now in the intercultural dialogue chair. So that's how I get to know Deborah. And yeah, I guess we had a first connection. I was like amazed with all the amazing work that she's doing in the world and her story. And then I guess we had another one connection. And of course I share about this project, my event, and she has a lot of amazing stories, connection to her ancestors. She's a grandma herself, and she will tell us more about that. So that's why I invited Deborah today, because I know this is going to be like fun. I was telling her this is my playground here, so I love to play. And the idea today is just for us to have a very informal conversation. You are gonna tell your story. I'm gonna maybe ask some questions and interact, but this is your space for everybody, and share your wisdom, your story, and the amazing work you do. So before we go to that, Deborah is a Forbes magazine top diversity and inclusion trailblazer. She founded the online America Diversity Report 17 years ago. She will tell us more about that. And continues as its editor-in-chief and podcast host. And she's also an award-winning author of 18 books. She also created the documentary Untold Stories of a World War II Liberator, which her father's wartime letters as a U.S. military intelligence officer assigned to interrogate Nazis POWs. Wow, that sounds interesting. You will tell us more about that. She served as a research coordinator for a College of Engineering and Computer Science, and was one of the first female IT directors in the 1980s. Born in Brooklyn, New York, brought up in Bermuda, she attended Harvard, New York University, and the University of Illinois, Chicago, and has degrees in cultural anthropology, urban planning, and religion. She currently resides in Chattanooga, Tennessee, where she was the Jewish Federation's first and only woman executive director, and founded the Women's Council on Diversity. So that's what I'm saying. It's like she's really something. And I remember that you told me at one point that we were having an amazing conversation that is like, if there is something that I want and that has not been created, I will go ahead and create it. So it's like, wow, you are really, really something. So Deborah, this is your space, and please tell us more about you and share your amazing story and wisdom with all of us.
Well, thank you so much. Where to start? I'll start as a child growing up in Bermuda, right? A small island,
Yeah.
the only Jewish little girl on the island,
Wow.
right? And my family, my mother's side of the family, were and still are, the only Jewish family to have lived for 4 generations on the island.
Wow.
And my grandfather, Meyer Malloy, is one of the founding 400 of the island. I didn't know any of that growing up. We were just kids, right?
Right. Yeah, having fun.
Having fun. My mother teaching me how to swim. I hated getting my face wet. It wasn't easy. And later I asked her, how did you manage to teach me how to swim? Even though in the 1930s she had been a lifeguard. And all she said was, you think it was easy?
Oh, I love
It, my mother went to the same school that I did, the Bermuda High School for Girls, and eventually ran uh, into the issue of going to college and went to Radcliffe.
it.
At that time, it was the Women's College of Harvard, where
Mhm.
she met my dad.
Oh,
Right.
love it.
Yes, yes. And they married, and it was during World War II. Now, before I talk about my dad, I want to explain that my mother was very sweet, soft-spoken, kind, and gentle. And my father said to me once, never make the mistake of thinking your mother is a pushover. Ask me how I know that.
Very clever.
Yeah. So, as a little girl, I can remember my mother taking me aside when I said something to uh, a friend during a birthday party that I had already gotten the same gift she just gave me. My mother took me aside and said, you were rude. And I said, no, I was just telling the truth. And Mom says to me, nobody cares. If you're mean and rude, that's what they hear. Understand me?
Mhm.
I'm very fortunate to have had my mother to teach me some basics about dealing with humans because it wasn't my thing. But was so generous in taking me when we came to America, and I didn't like it here, to places where it would be my thing. She took me to see ballet concerts. I love dancing. I love music. My parents allowed me to take violin lessons. It was in New York, so I got to see all kinds of famous people perform. It has shaped my life forever. And one of the things that isn't mentioned in your um, introduction to me is that um, I had my own dance company. And it was a historic dance company. I loved history, a Baroque dance company. And I choreographed. I did all kinds of things because I had also been the president of the dance company at high school. But my health intervened and I had to stop dancing. Everything inflamed. I couldn't play the violin. I couldn't do any of this. What was I going to do with my life, I wondered. And I went to the teacher at high school and I said, I have to resign as president of the dance company. I can't dance. And she said, that's not why we chose you. You will stay and you will be president, which meant that I did all the choreography, the
I love
staging, the
that.
lighting, the
Mhm.
costumes, everything, the music. I wouldn't have done it otherwise.
Right.
And all this, right? What?
That's so amazing.
I didn't ask for it either. It was, and that's how things happen so often in my life. Do it, we know you can.
Mm.
And in writing about that for my essays for Radcliffe, Harvard, um, I think that's one of the reasons why they took me, because I was, quote, interesting. And I use that word because when I had to decide on my major, right, I went to the dean. We all had to have a one-on-one session. And I said to her, I would like to major in world religions. Back in the
That's
1960s, it
very
did not exist, right? And the dean said to me, we took you because you were interesting, but now that you're here, you do economics or English like everyone else. I did not.
Uh-oh.
I became a student in the first year ever offered of something called folklore and mythology. And there was a minor in cultural anthropology. And it shaped me forever in the science of storytelling,
Oh,
right? It would be decades before I came across my mother's publications in the 1940s about the influence of stories on children.
mm,
I didn't know that that's what she had done.
wow.
It was like in the DNA. It was weird, but it was totally right. Right? Because I think she had trained me from day one in how stories develop young people and used some very old Victorian British stories that were popular in Bermuda to train me in my character. That's what they were for.
Got
Right?
it.
Now, of course, I was still me. So at 4 years old, my parents were out. The neighbors were babysitting, but they weren't around. So I snuck downstairs, got some butterscotch pudding and a flashlight, went upstairs under the covers to read one of these stories. Right? And all of a sudden, the neighbor who found me, pulled the blanket off me and said, "What are you doing?" I wanted to say, "What do you think I'm doing?" But but that was me. I was able to read very young and to write,
Wow.
and it was a passion that I still have today.
Today, how many books?
Still
18.
have it. Yes, indeed. So it started, and I know my mom was part of it.
Wow.
She was not alone. My grandmother, who also lived in Bermuda, right?
Mm-hmm.
Born in the, I'd say, 1890s, had gotten her high school diploma, which was unusual for a woman back in those days.
Yes.
And she became an office worker. And during the Depression, she was the one who supported the family.
Oh, wow.
Um, her name was Ida Swig Malloy. She was one of 11 children of immigrant family. And she married my grandpa, also son of immigrants, and they moved to Bermuda. And my grandmother was a force of nature, a leader. She
Hmm.
became the head
Mm.
of the Bermuda Garden Society.
Garden.
She donated the encyclopedia to the Bermuda Library. She donated the ambulance to the Bermuda Hospital.
Wow.
So many times my family donated modern items
Yeah,
into this little island. And I accepted that as norm, right?
got it. Yeah.
My grandfather was the first person to hire a black woman in the front office. I
That's
thought that, of
amazing.
course,
Yes. Yeah.
right?
For you, it was normal. Like, this is it.
Yeah,
Why
really.
not? Right?
I loved
Wow.
her.
Wow.
And that was part of my growing up. And my mom and dad, um, they just had this incredible passion for thinking about the future.
Mhm.
And eventually, my father moved us to New York to be
Wow.
in a Jewish community. When you take a young girl like I was, 7 or 8, right, out of a small island into New York,
Wow.
Long Island, New York,
Like the opposite. I can
um,
just imagine.
I, there's actually a name for it. It's called a polyglot
Oh,
because you are able to engage and absorb
huh,
different cultures, different ways of speaking, writing,
yeah.
working with people. It wasn't overnight by any means, and I got bullied and attacked physically
Mm,
because I was so different. Um, but I persevered, right? Especially going to concerts and dance and museums and art. It took the edge off of being so different. But that never went away. And it didn't go away when I went to Radcliffe, right? There weren't that many Jewish young people.
mhm,
And we had roommates, right? I had a roommate. Somebody had a sense of humor and put me in the room with a young woman named Mary McCarthy,
mhm,
a Catholic Irish young woman who also happened to be the daughter of Senator Eugene McCarthy,
oh,
who
wow.
was about to run for president.
Mm,
Right?
okay.
And his dad and I walked down the hall to my room, and it was filled with reporters, and I knew they weren't there for me. Daddy says to me with what my daughter calls an evil laugh, Kid, you're about to learn a whole lot more than you expected.
God, life is
Sto-
crazy. Yeah.
Story of my life, right?
Wow. Wow.
And so, it, it, the the beauty of it all is I love to learn, and
Mm,
I don't necessarily go according to the book. So I went over to Harvard Divinity School and started taking courses, even though, and I didn't know this, freshmen weren't allowed to do that. Oh well. Right. So I had now this background, uh, academic background that has been part of my interfaith work
mhm,
for the rest of my life. Unfortunately, I got sick again with the inflammation, couldn't move, had to leave, and finished my senior year living at home and actually graduating from New York University.
mm,
You're talking 1960s
wow.
Greenwich Village. Now, you may not know much about the hippie era, but all of a sudden, I was just deposited into hippiedom, right? I
I
had to
love it.
buy the colorful clothes and the bell-bottom pants.
Fancy. Yeah.
You know, I often think it was divine intervention of taking me out of the ivory tower of Harvard and depositing me into this street smart community and trying to hold my own. It was a it was amazing.
Oh,
Let's put it
wow.
this
Quite an experience. It's like,
way. It
wow.
was it was indeed. And when it was time to graduate, they told me I didn't have enough um, credits. And I said, no. They said, did you take anything at Harvard that might give you extra credits? Yes, I did. They had all put us, hundreds of us, in a room in Harvard and told us to take this test. And I didn't finish it because it didn't occur to me that if you looked in the back of the booklet, you'd find all the answers. It's called, in my view, cheating, but hey, Okay. So they made me take a writing course for no credit for a whole
Or
year. So, but
a writing
NYU,
course for you. There you go.
yep, yep, there you go. So intellectual boot camp. NYU gave me the credits and I graduated. But what was I going to do? Back in the days, I couldn't find a job. I became what we call Gal Friday, which is less than a secretary, and learned how to make coffee for the whole office.
Oh,
That was my
wow. Girl
world.
pride. I love it. Okay.
Hoping that someday I'd become a secretary and I'd
Yeah, at
even be,
least that, right? Yeah.
yeah. Yeah. But somehow I understood that this was not where I was supposed to be. And my health became a problem, and it gave me
Mm.
time to think. And that's when I went back to graduate school in urban planning and finished
Wow.
the degree. And of course, being me, right, I designed the course myself so that it would focus on the arts. It did, such a thing exists now, but it did not back then. And
Wow.
so I I did internships with museums, and eventually I became the development director of the Chicago City Ballet. Right?
Go back to dancing.
You
It's
you
always in
just
your
keep.
life, right? Yeah.
Well, the funny thing is that I had I had gotten a fellowship out at UCLA,
Yeah.
and I studied dance history. It's my love, right?
Mm-hmm.
And in there, I met the dancer who was the inspiration, the icon for Chicago City Ballet, Maria Tallchief.
Mm.
I, I got to work with her, and I did until
Wow.
the kind of went bankrupt. So, not my fault, by the way. And then I took other jobs. And what I experienced as program director for the a city nonprofit was being the only employee. They refused to give me the title of executive director. And after a while, it just annoyed me too much. And I left. And they hired a guy and they gave him the.
And they gave him, of course. Yeah. That's how it works.
And that's when I started my journey um, with the American Jewish Committee and the in Jewish advocacy and
Got
interfaith
it.
work.
Okay.
So I went in originally to be a sort of political reporter, and they said, "No, how about you become the director of the interfaith dialogues?" And I said,
Mm.
"Why me?" And they said, "Well, because you grew up as the only little girl, Jewish little girl in Bermuda you know how to represent.
Mm-hmm.
You went to Harvard and studied, and nobody else in the office wants to touch it with a 10-foot pole. It's too difficult." So I said, okay.
Oh, okay, I can do it.
All right. I needed the job. Whatever. So then I became the director of interreligious affairs and eventually a consultant to the main office in New York City. But I needed I needed more executive. I wanted executive director, wanted to be in charge.
Yeah.
That's who I am, right? So I took a job as the executive director in Rockford, Illinois, which is north of Chicago. And I was still getting my master's degree in religion in Jewish studies during the time, and was able to create there a script for a video about the Holocaust and interviewing survivors and liberators in Rockford and
Mm.
create this incredible classroom thing. Always a teacher, right? And I got invited to the opening of the U.S. Holocaust Museum in Washington, D.C. And I said to my dad, I said, I know you were, a soldier. I don't know much about what you did, but how would you like to come with me to the opening? And Daddy says to me, no, I don't need a museum. I saw the real thing.
Oh,
Whoa,
I get it.
what's that? And having said that, I decided to take a job in Tulsa, in Oklahoma, shortly after the Oklahoma City bombing to see what was going on with neo Nazis on our native soil.
Mm.
And I did. I got trained by the FBI in security. My father had somewhat of a meltdown, got on a plane from where they lived in Cincinnati to come. When I called him and I said, some of these survivors have never told these stories to even their own families. Can you imagine? And
Oh,
Daddy says to me, I never told you mine.
oh,
What?
wow. Starting from that point. What story?
I know.
Wow.
So he came, started to tell me how he had liberated a death camp called Nordhausen and other death camps, had interrogated these Nazi prisoners of war. And I just couldn't believe it. And I arranged for him to do a radio show interview with a friend.
Mhm.
And so that was the first time I think he ever spoke about it.
Wow.
Now, he had after the war become a retail manager, stores, department stores. But when he retired from that,
Mhm.
right, he became the chief financial officer of the American Jewish Archives in Cincinnati,
Okay.
historian.
Yeah.
And I realized, right, that history had always been part of my life.
Mm.
And I so appreciated his stories. I appreciated even more when he told me that he'd kept all his letters about the war during the war to my mother and hers to him hidden away in a file cabinet in his closet.
Oh, what a treasure.
So um, he sent them to me.
Wow.
It was so emotional.
Mm.
And I told him, you can't hide these. And I'm going to, because I'd already written several books, I'm going to write a book about you and about them. Well, writing a memoir is very different than writing in a workbook or a textbook or something. It's very personal, very emotional. And I, I had a rough time.
Oh,
And I showed
wow.
them to Daddy, and he said, well, you're getting there, which means bunch of crap, kid.
Not even
Keep
close.
trying. um, it took me 20 years to write and publish that book
Oh,
called The
wow, Deborah.
Liberator's Daughter. 20 years. Yeah.
Wow,
Mhm.
20 years. Wow. You, like a child that was born, raised, grew up as an adult, finally go out into the world and
Yeah.
wow, the living story.
And the beauty of it is, it started to win awards. I'm like,
Wow.
what? Now, I will say that my father had already passed away. He
Oh,
never
no
did see
kidding. He
it.
never saw it. Well, he knew it, but yeah, he never saw like the final piece. But yeah.
No, he never did, but he did know that I was
Oh yeah, he knew.
writing, and he helped me, right? So I wrote this book while he was still alive, teaching curious Christians about
How should
Judaism.
I got it?
And it won awards from the National Catholic Press Association.
Oh wow.
And it's it was something that he was so proud of that he shared it with a lot of different people. And I
Oh,
love it.
I can imagine.
So at least we have that. Yeah. But the memoir he did not see. But when people started to read it, right, they wanted something in addition.
Mm.
They wanted a second memoir that would be more personal, emotional.
Mm. Wow.
And I
Okay.
wrote this one more as history,
Got it.
right? But somehow I pulled myself together and I wrote this second one, The Magic Marble Tree.
Oh wow, I love that name. Why the
It
marble tree? Yeah, I'm curious.
why the magic? So the story begins in Bermuda,
Uh-huh.
and I am out in the garden, right? And I'm playing with these marbles.
Mm.
And my brother, older brother Joe, comes out with his dog Woofy, and he says to me, you know, if you plant those marbles in the garden, a wonderful you're laughing me, wonderful magic marble tree will grow, and all the marbles you'd ever want will blossom in this tree. Me being
Oh my
so
God.
he called it, sometimes he calls it vulnerable, other times he calls it the most, I'm the most clueless person on the planet, right? I immediately planted the marbles.
Of course. Oh wow.
And when nothing grew,
Mm.
I complained, and he just said, I can't believe you did that. And I ran away and I said to the Woofy, come on, Woofy, let's fly away. You could hear Joe yelling, dogs can't fly. And I yelled back, they can too, which pretty much summed up the difference between Joe and I.
Mhm.
And I started this second memoir like
Mm.
that, and people loved it,
Oh, I
right?
imagine.
They
Wow.
loved it. Recently, though, I decided that the 18 books that I have
Mm.
had published, right, are wonderful. Many of them are about religious diversity, cultural diversity, global leadership. Uh, it's been quite a journey because as a historian oriented person, I document everything, right?
Right. Yes.
So, um, but I thought, let's try for something more visual. And I started writing a script for a movie about my life.
Mm.
And it wasn't so great. And there's a gentleman here in town, Dylan Kussman, who had asked me to go on stage with him to introduce a movie called Wrestling Jerusalem years before, who had been a Hollywood actor and a producer, and I asked for his help. So we tried to do a 6-part series about my life called The Liberator's Daughter. And that script, it's not been produced, I hope it will be someday. That script has won in 31 international film festivals.
Oh, wow.
One across the world.
Hmm.
And my cousin Jan, who I went to Radcliffe with, says to me, it's going to be a long time to get something like that produced. Why don't you go for a radio play? She was in radio management
Yeah.
and women's theater. So I said, well, I don't know if I want to do it with my bio, but I would love to do it with the memoirs and Dad's letters. And having been taught how to write scripts, I was able to write a radio theater play combining the two memoirs with Dad's letters and Mom's letters,
Oh,
right? Oh, there it's amazing experience.
oh,
And
wow.
when I talked about it on Facebook, a lady in Florida sent me the memoirs, the letters of a Polish Holocaust survivor whom she had nursed
Mm.
when he came to America and promised she'd get his letters published. And so I combined them into the documentary that you mentioned, Untold Stories of a World
Yes.
War II Liberator. And originally it was just audio, right?
Uh-huh.
But you know me, let's go for
Go
it,
for more. This is not
right?
enough.
So I contacted someone from something called Jewish Life TV, which has broadcasts around the world. And I said, how about you do something with this? And he said, how about you do something yourself, like put in graphics and images? I said, I don't know how. So my son-in-law had taught me how to use iMovie. It's true, but I that was way beyond my abilities. He said, well, I will mentor you.
Wow.
And that's happened so often, right? And I said, okay. I didn't know what I was getting myself into. But the documentary that came out of it has been broadcast around the world, won in 15 different film festivals. And I'm being asked to talk about it, teach about it in universities for Holocaust educators internationally. It has become uh, such an amazing, right, education tool, and you know
Yeah.
I teach. So it's just changed my life. And then I thought, well, what next, right?
You can stop.
I never stop, right? So I had created these audio children's stories that I
Oh,
think I told you
yes.
about.
Yes, of course.
The
Mhm.
Bunny Bear Adventures in Diversity Land, oh, 20 years ago, maybe. And I thought, well, I have skills now. I can do something different with them. And so I created the video stories using artificial intelligence, AI, and created these incredible things for children. What fun! Mm, Bunny Bear. That's what Daddy called all the girls in the family.
Yeah.
Bunny. Yeah.
Oh, so sweet.
And it's just people think it's amazing because I'm old. How does an old grandma suddenly get into AI, right?
Right. Oh, I love that.
And I'm like, what? Um, and I tell you to go back to my mother. I think I tell you about how she made me take that computer programming course back in
Yes, you mentioned, but
1965.
not in this space. So yes, of course.
Okay. So it was first offered, and she said I had to take it. And I said, no, I'm
I
going to be a
remember.
poet. And she said, this is not a suggestion. Yes, ma'am. And
But
so,
she knew.
yep, I know when I'm done. So I took it, and the interesting thing was that when I came to America at age 7 or 8, I didn't know that I was so intelligent. It just seemed normal to me that they would start teaching me advanced math at that age. How many young women in the 1950s, right, were taught and tutored, right, in math, especially the kind of math, it'll come to me, that was, as my father put it, like military coding.
Mhm.
The new math, they called it. The new
Wow.
math. You start learning that kind of stuff when you're that young, it shapes your mind. And that's what they wanted. So I kept taking math. The parents didn't give me much choice until the very end of high school, taking the computer programming, but also I had a thing for languages. I took French and I took Russian
Wow.
because I thought Russia was going to take over the world and I was going to be ready to
You were
take
gonna be
everybody
ready. I know Russian,
to lead the
of
way.
course.
Хорошо.
Oh my God.
Yeah, that's me. And my parents never objected. And this is what my life has been like, you know. Let's prepare for the future, take a risk, jump forward. Um, my mother had done it. My grandmother
Yes.
had done it. I never met her mother, but my mother's younger sister, Polly, I I asked her once when she was still alive. She's not with us. She lived to be about 93, but she's not with us anymore. And I said, "What was your grandmother like?" And Polly said, "She was an amazing people person." I said, "What does that mean?" "It means that she came to me and said that I had to eat the eggs for breakfast. I couldn't leave them there. And why? Because the hens had laid them specially for me, and they would have very hurt feelings if I didn't eat them." So we have very strong women who find ways to, yeah,
Oh
it's
wow.
it's it's been an amazing thing, and you won't be surprised to know that my daughter is a strong woman
I'm
and a
sure.
psychiatrist.
Oh
She
wow.
is a psychiatrist.
Mm. Wow. It's like she never
And
stops
so it
surprising
goes
me. So
generations upon generations, and it's a thing of beauty. And Women's History Month is so precious to me,
it is.
you know.
Mm,
And this grandma thing is very special. It gives me a chance to remember and to thank, generations for the amazing people that they were. And not just the women, but the men
yeah,
also,
yeah.
you know. My was it great grandfather uh, in Boston was in finance, and he was in the 1920s among the first to ever hire blacks and women,
Um,
and in the banking industry.
yeah.
And he almost got bankrupt for it by other bankers who were mad at and could not tolerate that. So we have a history of inclusion in the family that always seemed just like the norm for me.
Mm,
And doing the diversity work,
mm,
so important for me. I was the executive director of the Jewish Federation here in Chattanooga. I did build the Jewish Federation's community center, help design it with the architects.
Of course.
But oh, absolutely. And of course, I included in it an art gallery where they could
Of course.
too, right? And then on a mission to Israel, where we stopped off at Uzbekistan, I got
Mm,
very, very ill.
mm,
And I had to, I mean, I was lucky to survive. I had to resign. What was I going to do with my life? I didn't think that I would have many years left to worry about, but I wasn't dead yet. So we had to do something. And after about 6 months, of which my husband says I just watched the grass grow, I got lonely. And so that's when I created the Women's Council on Diversity to
mm.
pull women together.
Yes.
Originally, it was just to keep me company, and it was lovely. But the first meeting, this is how my life works. The first meeting was the day after 9/11.
Oh, wow. Well, yeah, that's how your life works. I get it. Everywhere,
Yes.
everything is so symbolic.
I know. I said, what? And so coming together
Wow.
in this chaotic moment was a lot different than I had planned and so necessary. And the
Oh,
mayor got involved, and
of
it just
course.
pushed panels with stories. And I started to take women from behind the scenes, you know, women who frequently, ran the meetings and the food and whatever, and in churches and whatnot. I taught them how to tell their stories.
Oh,
And I put them on panels so the world, the community, could hear them and they wouldn't be strangers anymore.
mm,
Science of storytelling came to life.
wow.
And eventually, I created something called the Women Groundbreakers Storytelling Events. And it went on for years until I got hired as a consultant to train international executives coming into the South. We were
Mhm.
changing the
Mm,
culture here,
yeah.
and I couldn't do everything. But, right, something about this year inspired me to recreate it after so many years.
I
And so
know.
this month,
Yes.
there will be another Women Groundbreakers storytelling event
Mm,
featuring 4 different women, very different journeys in their career, but each one of them taking leadership and creating community resources and developing diverse communities. And we'll be sharing it both in person and online.
and online. Yes.
Yeah, yeah. And it's, I didn't realize that people had missed me doing it until I started getting emails that said, "Yay, she's back."
Yes. Everybody needed that. Oh, I love it. When is this going to be so everybody can join? And
Well,
I will share some information as well, like
sure.
down here.
It will
Yes.
be Thursday, March 7th,
Okay.
right? At 5 a.m. Eastern Time, New York time. It will be both online and in person.
Okay.
And you can register so you get the Zoom link.
Mm-hmm.
If you go on to the American Diversity Report, you will see the article that starts with a beautiful picture that says Women's History Month.
Oh, amazing. Yes.
Yeah. And you'll have a link to register. and then you'll get the Zoom link yourself. And the
Amazing.
more the merrier. It's a labor of love.
Mm. Are you going to record it so people can watch it after as well, if
I think we
possible?
will. Yeah,
Yes,
we're
yes,
gonna we're
good,
gonna try
good.
and do that. The the technology of it is going to be helped by a variety of people, and it's going to be held in this small community of East Ridge, Tennessee, and it'll go worldwide.
Oh, I
That's
love it.
my
Well, I
aim.
will be there. I will be joining online, but for sure I will be
Oh,
there. I can't miss it. Yes.
oh,
Oh,
good,
yes,
good. We'll get you registered and
yes,
linked up,
yes.
and we'll look forward to your thoughts about it.
I will for sure. I'm sure it's going to be amazing. I'm sure it's going to be amazing. Like this conversation has been amazing. Hearing your story, this little girl coming from Bermuda, from a Jewish family, and fourth generation, going to New York. It's like, what? You will never imagine. Like, wow, where you are now, everything you have gone through, like through dancing, through executive, director of different institutions, interfaith dialogues, and so many stories through universities, writing 18 books. And look at you. It's like a grandma that is now with AI and bringing back projects, and you never
Yeah.
stop. It's like, and you were saying
Oh,
you're such an amazing, intelligent, smart woman, and it doesn't just stay that, because a lot of people are very smart, are very intelligent, but they just don't know how to put it out there. But you are one of a kind, that is like, you really know how to, it's like, okay, I have this idea. I need to, I need to write a book. I need to create
yeah.
this. I need to plan something. I need to do, of course, like you were saying, I need to do some art here with these architects in, in the in the
Yeah.
institution, or is wow. Yeah, you're such an
Yeah.
inspiration. It's like, that's what is
Oh,
really needed, because sometimes we all have amazing ideas and things, but we don't just go and do it, because either we are afraid, or because we don't know how to, or I don't know. But it's for you, when we
it
listen to your story, it seems so easy. It's like, why not? I'm just gonna do it. I'm just gonna write a book.
well, it isn't quite that simple,
No,
but
I know it's not, but you make
but
it sound that
for
way.
example, oh no, 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 no. For example, when I worked for the American Jewish Committee in Chicago, right, and became the director of the dialogues, they came to me and said, "Would you also be the director of this National Conference of Christian Jewish Relations?" And I'm like, "Help!"
I know.
And I got help, but I did do it. And I
That's the
ran
thing. Yes.
this amazing conference, including representatives from the Vatican, right? And I had pictures. And but I was exhausted after it. And I took a break. And after that, though, now what? You know me.
Yeah.
So I created in the western suburbs of Chicago uh, an interfaith group, because that's what I had done. It was called the DuPage Interfaith Resource Network, and I just pulled some people together. Right? In the first meeting, some of them got into a fight, and
Oh,
I had to make the rules so that we would move forward together. I was the mommy, right?
right.
This is how it's going to be, children. No fighting like that. I'm like,
Yes, ma'am.
I didn't even know I had it in me, right? So, But that project, right, created incredible programs through difficult times when there were protests in the streets. You name it. It was really a hostile environment, but we did amazing things. And I created as part, a subtext of it, said part of it, a special group for women. That's what I've often done. And it was just, it supports you, it gives you ideas, it gives you all kinds of inspiration. And it's something, of course, that I documented. And it's amazing that people find me to do interesting things. So while I was working like that, the county law enforcement officers contacted me to help them deal with diverse communities when they find that there are problems. They wanted me to carry 24/7, some kind of radio so they could call me, help, what are we supposed to say and do? I had a young child, I couldn't do that. I
Right.
said, so, and I said, I was desperate. I will create the resources for you so
Okay.
that you have them ongoing.
Mm,
And that's when I created something called Quick Reference Religious Diversity Cards.
mm,
Because I knew they wouldn't read a book, they didn't have time. So it was charts, what you do with different sacred times, sacred places, language, food, and I still use it today.
I
And I
know.
train corporations in this and religious diversity. I call it, a sort of religious competence and literacy. Uh, and with the world going the way it is now,
Yes, that's so
it
important.
is in, it is in demand more than ever.
It is.
And those cards were created, 30 years ago?
Wow.
And there you go. It's still, and what I want to make clear about it's still relevant is what I create is sustainable.
Yes.
I do it on purpose,
Mm,
looking into the
mm,
future, seeing the consequences, seeing
mm-hmm.
what's developing, the trends, and the difficulties, so that what I create, right, can be relevant decades from now.
Mm, I love that. And actually, it's like my last question was going to be that because this year theme, it also comes with a question that is, what did you do once you knew? And is like ask ourselves, what is our legacy? What is that we're leaving for the future generations? And it's like this has been your life because it's like everything you have done, it has a purpose, and you're always looking into the future, like what I am doing is really going to create an impact even 30 years after. Is so
Yes.
actual and is so relevant, but everything you have done. So
Thank you. That is the goal because I didn't think I'd be around. So it had to be a
yeah.
legacy.
Yes.
And then I'm still here. You know, this is interesting.
It is true. And yes,
It's
and
true.
yeah.
And it's been an amazing journey, a
Wow.
difficult one
Yes,
many
I know
times.
that.
You
Yes.
But I am so grateful for the people who have mentored me and loved me, taught me, been there with me on the journey, for better or worse. It's a a journey that you make pretty much alone, except for the angels who bless you with their presence,
Mm.
right? And it's something that I can't say that I leave it for my daughter, of course, for her generation. And she's actually had me teach some of my work to healthcare
Oh,
professionals,
okay.
you know, and I forgot to mention, you're gonna love this, right? When I did the Women's Council on Diversity, I had to find a way to pull people, women especially, out from the behind the curtain and have the wisdom, right, to be in charge, because that's what I wanted. And so I invented, right, something I guess you'd call it based on neuroscience,
Mm-hmm.
30 years ago, called the Matrix Model Management System. And it's a 3 or 4 step process, beginning with the science of storytelling, going then to emotional intelligence and learning how to involve both of them at the same time, then going to the issue of smart decision making. And based on the information from the stories, the emotional intelligence, and then lastly, going to the ability for long range planning,
Wow.
the urban planning in me, right?
Got it. Yes.
And, and so I have taken organizations through this process, right? So that they have the ability to to grasp what really goes into planning
Mm,
to make it sustainable and successful.
mm.
Instead of just jumping in, say, oh,
Right.
let's do this,
Yeah.
right? And then watch it
Yes.
fall on its face.
Yes.
No, no, no urban planner worth their salt's going to tolerate
Of
that.
course. Everything has to be sustainable with a purpose, like you do it.
Yes,
Oh,
exactly. And not only that,
so much
but
sense. Mm.
so how do you get people to go through the process?
Mm.
I'm a teacher, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I create workbooks and
Oh,
you
I
can read
love it.
them, and you go through and this it turns out that what I created all those years ago also addresses unconscious bias.
Of course.
It wasn't called that then.
No, no, this unconscious bias is very recent, like 10 years,
Yeah,
and that's all. Yeah.
exactly. So the vocabulary changes, the human brain, not so much.
Mm-mm.
And so I keep going with what I invent and apply and are able to assist people through very difficult times and conflicts. That's what I do,
Mm.
as I'm the grandma and mom, the nurturer,
Yes.
right, as well as the inventor, writer, and executive.
Mm. And teacher. Amazing. Oh, Deborah, this has been such a pleasure. Like, wow, such a delight journey just going through that story with you and learning this amazing woman. Is a blessing to have you here because I know it's been like not an easy journey, an amazing one, full of legacy, full of amazing things and resources for everybody. And people have to know more about that and about your work. And that's why I want with this space, to really bring it out there. Everybody needs to know women like you and all your wisdom and all the amazing things you're doing for this world that we need it so much. So thank you. I can't thank you enough, really, for sharing this. And thank you. Yeah, I just look forward to be there in the event, in the International Women's Day that you're also celebrating and that you're also planning. And this is the start of a new journey for us as well. I know, in intercultural dialogue and so many other things that will come together. So I'm just blessed to have you in my life, and thank you so much.
Thank you. It's wonderful to be able to share all of this. And I look forward, right, to helping others who are looking to the future too.
For sure. So we will be sharing all your information so everybody can reach out if needed and access your work. And thank you everybody for listening today. It's a pleasure to be here, and just look forward for more Grandma's March. Have a great and amazing evening. Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye.